Hello to all of my classes. I'm doing a different type of announcement for this week. So this is going to be one that I address to all of my classes. I'm going to start off with just some little bits of information that I need to address to my two US 101 classes and my Western Civ class. And then I'm going to do a brief discussion of some thoughts that I'd like to articulate to you all on the Israel-Palestine conflict that you're seeing. And due to what is happening like in real time and what you're seeing on the news, I felt it was pertinent to maybe give you a little more food for thought than maybe what you're seeing on the media or hearing being discussed if you actually care about what's happening. So first of all, I have a US 101 history class that recently started. You are a late start class. I want to remind you that on Thursday, I'm opening up the second part. So that's very important for you to remember. I have a week's worth of work that's going to be due up until Thursday. And then on Thursday, I will open up the next section that will be the same kind of work that you're seeing now, and it'll be due on Sunday, okay? So I need you to keep that in mind so that you can plan accordingly. And just remember that that's how that's going to go until we finish up in December. For everyone else, I just want to say I'm sorry I'm a little bit behind on my grading. I'm trying to catch up. For the most part, you are all doing great. And this is a very challenging part of the semester because it's also where we start getting a little bit tired. And some of you are getting behind a little bit. Please contact me if you need help or motivation. I want to make sure that we all continue, successfully and that you get the grades that you feel that you deserve. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And before I do that, I need to say a few things. So first of all, when it comes to the way I teach classes, I like to make sure that I'm nuanced, and I have very strong political opinions, like many of you. But I try to make sure that no one feels that you're being bombarded with my points of view on everything in the class. And that no matter what your views are, that it's a safe place for you as a student to be able to just be who you are, do the work that I require, and feel comfortable. But occasionally, there will be something that's happening in the real time that is so huge that I feel that I need to at least say something about it. Especially when it comes to this conflict, because of the fact that it was a major part of my research in undergraduate school, getting my BA, and some projects that I did independent studies in grad school. Okay, so also I need to say that in the United States, with a lot of the current events that's been happening over the last several decades, racism towards Muslims, or I should say paranoia, Islamophobia, it's not racism, it's not a race, Islam is a religion, right? Or anti-Semitism, racism against Jewish people, has been something that has been a problem on both sides. And ironically, right, we're having a conflict between two people that both have a history of people hating on their ethnicity. And so to even clarify this, when I'm talking about racism, is if you don't like a particular group of people, not because of what they do, but who they are. So we do have on both sides of this conflict, people who just hate Israel because it's Jewish, and people who just hate the Palestinians because they're majority Muslim, even though a lot of them are also Christian by birth, okay? For me, what I'm trying to acknowledge is that is something I condemn on all sides, that to remove the racism part. I'm not having a conversation with racists. I'm talking to those of you in good faith that just want to understand the dynamic of this conflict. And so also, I want to say that, yes, the violence that you can watch on the TV and see Hamas do, and you see the kidnappings and what that's doing to some of the parents, are horrific. And we should always reject that kind of behavior by any regime or individuals. But I need to kind of also put something into perspective for you all, and I'm going to link this in a little bit later. In America, when we had slavery, there was a revolt from a black slave named Nat Turner. And he was a slave of a white family in America, and he decided to resist. He killed the family, even their daughter and an infant. It was a horrific act of violence. But if we were to just get hung up on that horrific act of violence and not actually understand the broader context, the problem of slavery, we really wouldn't be holding any moral high ground if we simply said what Nat Turner did was horrific and not address the fact that slavery is the context and it's horrific. And so I'm going to explain a little bit more about this. Now look, I also want to make this very clear. Years ago, I was invested in trying to understand this conflict, and I had many Jewish American friends that actually studied this conflict, went over to Israel and Palestine, and took back a perspective that they gave me on why they sympathize with the Palestinians. And my own research in school has also led me to that position, that under the conflict, I am sympathetic towards the Palestinians. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So first of all, I'm trying to think, there's been so many events that's been taking place that I know that it can be overwhelming to even figure out where to start. So let's go with the fact that I stated that Nat Turner is something, and what happened there would be something to look at. If you're being bothered by what you saw Hamas do to Israel, you weren't bothered by what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians because you didn't see it on TV. In other words, this isn't the start of the conflict, okay? Gaza has been under a blockade since 2007. Basically, many refer to it as an open-air prison. Life for people in Gaza, for the entire population, is terrible. If you look at the West Bank, the other part of the Palestinian territories, you can just Google to just see what Jewish settlers from Israel do to the Palestinians. They take their land. They have barriers which block off neighborhoods. Life is miserable. When it comes to kidnapping, there are over several hundred children that are in prison, Palestinian children that Israel has incarcerated, and human rights groups from Israel like Bet Salem and some other groups point out that these children are under very terrible conditions. So that part has not been really discussed in the narrative. Also, the idea that Gaza has been under a blockade. I just want to read this. I have this old book on the Israel-Palestine conflict, and a former politician from Israel, Abba Eban, he was a very influential, he had several positions within the Israeli government. And he tried to talk about a justification for Israel to do a preemptive strike on Egypt because of a blockade. This is what he said back in the 60s about blockades. To blockade, after all, is an attempt it is to attempt strangulation, and sovereign states are entitled not to have their state strangled. The blockade is by definition an act of war, imposed and enforced through violence. Never in history have blockade and peace existed side by side. From May 24 onward, the question of who started the war or who fired the first shot became momentously irrelevant. There's no difference in civil law between murdering a man by slow strangulation or killing him by a shot in the head. Unquote. So the Israeli position to justify war in the past, preemptive war, was that saying that being under a blockade is an act of violence and that is already an act of war, collectively on a people. That is what the Palestinians have been experiencing from Israel, who is the #1 military aid recipient of the US government, at least $4 billion a year in military aid. And diplomatically, they get to do what they want to the Palestinians. Currently, the government that is in Israel has people in political parties that were called racist by Israel decades ago and are now allowed to be in power because Netanyahu has facilitated them coming to power and basically said it's okay that your extreme racist views towards Palestinians, your ideas about ethnic cleansing, all of that is acceptable. It's acceptable because it's also keeping him in power. This is the environment that the Palestinians have had to suffer from. So Hamas or no Hamas, it doesn't matter. In other words, when people were under slavery, whether Nat Turner existed or not and did that atrocity against a baby and a family, you rather support slavery or you don't. And you would understand that slavery is going to create a terrible set of circumstances. And Nat Turner's actions would not be what you would focus on. You would need to question the institution of slavery. What's happening within Israel between Palestine right now? Now, this has been something that has escalated because of the Israeli blockade and the treatment of Palestinians. And now Israel is openly carpet bombing all of Gaza and saying that the blockade will be worse. No medical supplies being allowed in. I mean, it's a pretty horrific thing. And the majority of the world sees it for what it is. In America, we have a hard time with it for various sets of reasons. Some of you have religious reasons. There's some Christian groups that see this link to the end times, and you're looking at it through that lens. Some of you have family members who died in the Holocaust. That's a real trauma. That's a real fear, and that you're looking at this through that lens. But what I just like you all to do is to actually just stop and pause and ask yourself, have you really explored why Palestinians are resisting Israeli dominance? What about the power imbalance that exists there? And again, this is not even saying that under any circumstance that again, this is not a critique of Jewish people. It's not a critique even of the Israeli public. It's a critique of the Israeli state. And just like us here, our government may do things in our name that we don't support. I give anybody that's a citizen of or a subject of another state the right to be separate from the actions of their own state. But they have to be separate. And if you are accepting the narrative that Israel is the sole victim of all of this and that there's no responsibility for Israel's behavior, then what you're saying is what you've watched on TV and was so horrifying is okay as long as it only happens to Palestinians. That's the sad truth of this. We need to condemn seeing any human suffering by civilians happening to children. We don't want to see anybody's parents crying. But yes, I am putting the onus on the Israeli blockade and the occupation and the stealing of land of Palestinians. And that is something that I am going to make my stand on. And I'm going to ask you to research. Now, if you have a strong opinion about this as my student, I'm not going to, if you want to have a discussion with me, if you want to challenge something I'm saying, that will not affect your grade or my relationship with you in this classroom. I just feel morally, as a professor who has studied this conflict a lot and sees this as a very important thing to make to make a position on, that freeing Palestine from this oppression I think that people who feel this way need to make the stand and let it be known that the United States can't just take one side of a conflict and allow Israel to treat the Palestinians, again, the way that you have watched on TV, seeing those horrible sights to Israelis. I'll leave it at that. I know that there's also a complex history to like how it even got there. I didn't cover that. I will gladly, or I shouldn't say gladly, I will diligently make myself available to have any kind of discussion about this that you want. And again, any challenges that you put up on me, that's acceptable, okay? And there's no repercussions to you. So I hope everybody has a great week, and may this conflict get resolved justly as soon as possible.